I had been looking forward to the family party for weeks. Not because I loved being the centre of attention, I never did, but because I wanted to prove, at least to myself, that I was more than just the quiet one. I had spent hours picking the perfect outfit, something elegant yet understated, a reflection of the woman I was finally learning to be. I wanted to walk in with my head held high, despite all the whispers and comparisons that had followed me my whole life. But the moment I stepped into the room, I realised my efforts meant nothing. My sister, as radiant and confident as always, spotted me immediately. With that perfectly timed smirk that always seemed to slice through the air, she waved at me and called out to her friends, "Everyone, this is our family's, well, the failure of the family." The words hit me like a slap. Laughter erupted around the room. Even Dad chuckled, shaking his head as if this was some harmless joke. I froze, my stomach twisting into knots, cheeks burning, my heart pounding in a rhythm that made it hard to breathe. I wanted to vanish. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. But I couldn't move. I was trapped in a spotlight of humiliation. Then I noticed him, her boss, the one she had been secretly seeing, David. He was standing a few steps away, holding a glass of wine, but his eyes were on me. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, not judgment, not amusement, but curiosity, maybe even concern. My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, the shame and laughter around me blurred into the background. I couldn't look away from him, even as my sister's teasing continued. She laughed again, dragging me into small talk, introducing me like some sideshow to the rest of the guests. "And this," she said with all the charm she could muster, "is the family disappointment. Isn't she adorable in a tragic sort of way?" Everyone giggled, some awkwardly, some openly, and my father nodded, smiling faintly. I could feel my chest tighten, hot tears pricking the corners of my eyes, but David's gaze remained. He wasn't laughing, he wasn't mocking, he was watching, studying, and, oddly enough, he seemed interested. For the rest of the evening, I floated through the party like a ghost, unnoticed by most, except for him. Every time our eyes met, there was a silent acknowledgement, a spark I couldn't explain. And yet the awareness of my sister's secret relationship with him made it complicated, forbidden, and thrilling all at once. My emotions were tangled: humiliation, anger, confusion, and an unexpected, dangerous attraction. By the time the party was winding down, I realised something. That night would not just be remembered for the humiliation, nor for my sister's smug satisfaction. It would be remembered for a spark that had been ignited, a connection that defied rules, family loyalty, and logic. And deep down I knew one thing with absolute certainty: my life and my heart would never be the same. The days after the party were a blur. I kept replaying every moment in my head. The laughter, my sister's smug smile, my father's nod, and of course, the way David had looked at me. I couldn't get that glance out of my mind. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I felt it deep in my chest. Something had shifted, and I didn't know if I should be terrified, exhilarated, or both. Work returned to its usual rhythm, but now every interaction with David carried an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. Simple things, a brush of hands when handing over a file, a brief smile across the room, the way he lingered just a fraction longer in conversations with me, made my heart race. I told myself I was imagining it. He was her boss, after all, and he was with my sister. Nothing could happen. Nothing should happen. But then subtle moments became harder to ignore. A shared coffee break where our fingers brushed over the cup, a meeting where he complimented an idea I had quietly contributed to, making my heart skip a beat. A private joke about a shared office mishap that no one else understood. Each moment felt electric, forbidden, and thrilling. I started noticing the small things about him. The way he leaned in slightly when listening to me, the warmth in his voice, the faint hesitation in his actions whenever my sister entered the room. Something about him was different with me. And yet there was guilt, or at least loyalty, in his eyes too. I could sense it, and it both tormented and tempted me. One late afternoon I stayed behind to finish a report. David appeared at my desk, holding a folder I had asked him about earlier. "Here," he said softly, placing it in front of me. Our fingers brushed again, lingering slightly longer than necessary. I looked up, and for a heartbeat, the world around us seemed to stop. He caught my eye, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I felt my pulse spike, and I realized I wasn't imagining it anymore. There was something here, something undeniable. At the same time, the tension was unbearable. I knew he was with my sister. Every glance, every smile, every subtle touch was a dangerous game, but I couldn't stop noticing, and I couldn't stop feeling that pull, that magnetic connection that both thrilled and terrified me. My heart was walking a tightrope over a chasm of guilt, desire, and suspense. One misstep, and everything could collapse: family, trust, love, everything. By the time I left the office that evening, I felt a strange mixture of exhilaration, and I was falling into something I shouldn't, into feelings that were forbidden, complicated, and electrifying. And deep down, I knew the next encounter with him wouldn't just be another accidental moment. Something was building, and it was impossible to ignore. My life and my heart were being pulled into a storm that I couldn't resist. It didn't take long for me to start noticing things. Subtle, secretive things that didn't make sense at first, but slowly painted a picture I wasn't ready to see. I saw the way my sister's phone would buzz, and David's eyes would flicker ever so slightly toward it, a hidden understanding passing between them. I noticed hushed whispers when they thought no one was listening, and glances that lasted just a fraction too long. My stomach churned every time, but I couldn't look away. One afternoon, I stayed late at the office to finish a report. The office was quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound. I thought I was alone, but then I heard a soft laugh, a familiar, hushed laugh that I knew belonged to my sister. Curious, I peeked around the corner and saw her leaning against David's desk, their faces close, whispering about something I couldn't hear. My heart sank. My intuition, the same one that warned me all those years, had been right. They were together. The betrayal stung in ways I didn't expect. I had been drawn to him, captivated by his attention, and now I realized that while I was secretly falling for him, he was with her, my sister. I felt my cheeks burn with anger, shame, and jealousy all at once. Every stolen glance, every subtle smile he had given me now felt tainted. Had it ever been genuine, or was it just a cruel twist of fate? Yet, despite the betrayal, something inside me stirred. I noticed the small differences in the way he treated me versus her, a lingering glance that didn't reach her, a subtle hesitation whenever she was nearby. It confused me, infuriated me, and yet it made my pulse race. There was something here, something forbidden, something impossible to ignore. I didn't know what to do. Should I confront them? Should I pretend I hadn't noticed? Or should I let the storm inside me build, gathering strength until I could face them both? Every moment became a tightrope walk between curiosity, desire, and heartbreak. Every glance at them together was a knife twisting in my chest, and every private interaction with him was a spark I couldn't extinguish. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I replayed every encounter, every fleeting touch, every word spoken across desks and hallways. I realized one thing with painful clarity. The story I thought I was living, ordinary office days, family drama, and subtle attractions, was nothing compared to the reality. Secrets had been hiding in plain sight, and I was at the center of a storm I didn't yet understand, and one thing was certain: my life was about to change in ways I couldn't yet imagine. My mind replayed the moments I had witnessed earlier, the whispered laughs, the stolen glances, the subtle gestures that now made perfect sense. The realization that David, the man whose attention had stirred something deep inside me, was involved with my sister, cut deeper than any insult or humiliation I had ever endured. I felt a whirlwind of betrayal, anger, and confusion. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Why was it that even in betrayal, my heart refused to let go? The next day at work, I found subtle confirmations of what I had feared. Emails left open, documents with her initials where his should have been, small notes he hadn't meant me to see. Each tiny piece of evidence confirmed the truth I dreaded, yet it was oddly thrilling because now I had clarity. The lines were drawn, and the stakes were higher than I had imagined. I confronted him privately, trying to keep my voice steady. "I saw you," I said, eyes searching his. "I saw everything with her. Why?" His expression faltered. There was guilt there, yes, but also something I hadn't expected, an acknowledgement, almost admiration. "It wasn't meant for you to find out," he said quietly, "but I can't lie anymore. You've always seen me differently. I just didn't know how to handle it." My heart tightened. Handle it? I echoed. You were with her. I know, he admitted, but there's something between us, something I can't ignore. His gaze held mine, intense and searching, and I felt that impossible pull again, the one I had tried to resist since the party. The revelation left me reeling, but it also sparked a fire I couldn't contain. I wasn't going to crumble under humiliation or betrayal. Instead, I realized that I had a choice. I could let the betrayal define me, or I could rise, claim my dignity, and somehow navigate this impossible tension with David. In that moment, I chose to rise. I would no longer be the victim. I would reclaim control, even if it meant dancing on the edge of danger, desire, and forbidden love. By the end of the day, I had a plan forming, not of revenge against David, but of reclaiming myself. I would show my sister, my family, and the world that I was more than their whispered judgments and cruel games. And as for David, I couldn't deny the thrill of the forbidden tension between us, the spark that would drive the next chapter of my life, whether it led to heartbreak or unexpected love. About the days after I discovered their secret felt like walking the frog. Every glance, every laugh, every word I overheard twisted inside me, cutting deeper than I ever expected. I couldn't escape the images of them together, the stolen glances, the whispered jokes, the way they seemed so connected. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't stop thinking about him. David, the same man who had looked at me that night at the party, the same man who had sparked something I couldn't name in my chest. I tried to focus on work, bury myself in reports and deadlines, but even the hum of the office seemed to remind me of him. Every time he walked past my desk, my heart betrayed me, skipping beats, stirring a cocktail of attraction, guilt, and anger. I hated him, and yet couldn't stop noticing the way he paused slightly longer when our eyes met, the way a soft smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Then came the encounters I hadn't expected. A casual conversation at the printer, just the two of us, his voice low and warm, asking about my weekend, pretending nothing had happened. My chest tightened. I wanted to scream at him, call him out, demand he explain why he had drawn me into this web of attraction and betrayal. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself responding, carefully measured, words carrying the tension we both knew but couldn't say aloud. The most difficult moments were seeing him with her, knowing that the intimacy he shared with my sister was real, and yet feeling every subtle gesture he had ever given me linger in my memory. Anger and jealousy warred with the pull of desire I couldn't seem to escape. I realized then that this wasn't just a story of betrayal or humiliation. It was a storm in my heart, one I couldn't control and one I couldn't run from. At night, I replayed every detail. The party, the office, the small touches, the shared smiles. I felt my hands tremble, my pulse racing. How could someone make me feel so alive and so broken at the same time? Every moment I had once treasured now carried the weight of deception. I hated them both, yet I couldn't erase the magnetic pull I felt toward him. And the more I tried to push him away, the more my mind and body betrayed me. I knew I couldn't stay passive. I had to act, not out of revenge yet, but to reclaim control of myself, my emotions, and my dignity. The storm inside me was building, and soon it would demand release. Every glance at them together, every secret whispered, was adding fuel to a fire that I could no longer ignore. And I realized something terrifying and thrilling at once. I was far from done. The heartbreak was only the beginning, and the path ahead was dangerous, complicated, and utterly irresistible. After days of torment, I realized I couldn't let my heartbreak and anger define me. I couldn't let them, my sister, my father, or even David, control my emotions any longer. So I decided to reclaim myself, piece by piece, day by day. I started small. I focused on work, pushing past the humiliation I'd endured, taking on projects that others overlooked. Every success became my quiet defiance. Every compliment a secret victory against the shadow of my sister's smugness. David noticed, of course. I saw it in the way he looked at me during meetings, a subtle admiration buried beneath professional restraint. It was maddening, confusing, and intoxicating all at once. He was still with her, but he couldn't hide the respect he now had for me. That subtle shift, the recognition of my intelligence, my resilience, was thrilling and terrifying. I wanted to hate him, to push him away, but a small, undeniable spark remained. Then came the opportunities. I presented a proposal that had been quietly brewing in my mind for weeks. I poured my heart and strategy into it, knowing it would shine under the scrutiny of senior management, and it did. The praise I received wasn't loud or showy. It was quiet, deliberate, and entirely satisfying. Every acknowledgement, every nod from the higher-ups felt like a whispered victory over the humiliation I had suffered. My sister noticed, of course, and I could see the flicker of unease in her eyes. Her confidence faltered, even if just for a moment. That moment tasted sweeter than I could describe. I also began testing the waters with David, carefully, subtly. Small interactions, questions about work, shared jokes that only the two of us understood, brief touches on the arm during meetings. I wasn't leading him and I wasn't asking for anything. But each encounter was a dance, a silent acknowledgement of the tension that neither of us could fully express. And every time I caught him watching me, lingering just a moment too long, I felt a thrill that both terrified and excited me. Outside of work, I focused on myself, fitness, hobbies, and small indulgences I had long ignored while trapped in the shadow of my sister. I rebuilt my confidence brick by brick, creating an aura that was impossible to ignore. And slowly, the subtle shift became undeniable. I was no longer the timid, humiliated sibling everyone mocked. I was rising, and the world, including David, couldn't help but take notice. And yet, I had to be careful. Every glance from him, every smile reminded me of what was forbidden. He was still her lover, still her secret. But there was something different now. Something unspoken, a connection that could no longer be denied. It wasn't a betrayal of her, it was recognition of me. And that recognition, more than anything else, fueled my determination. By the end of that week, I felt a shift inside me. I was no longer reacting to humiliation or heartbreak. I was leading my own life, quietly taking control and subtly turning the tables. The storm inside me had transformed from chaos into power, and deep down, I knew the moment was coming when I would confront both my sister and David, not with anger or desperation, but with strength, dignity, and the quiet confidence of someone who had discovered her own worth. This wasn't just subtle revenge. This was me reclaiming my life, and no one, not even my sister or her lover, could take it away from me. The day of the confrontation arrived quietly, without fanfare, but I felt the tension coiling in my chest like a living thing. I had rehearsed what I would say, how I would stand, and how I would let my presence speak louder than any words. This wasn't about shouting or tearing anyone down. This was about reclaiming every ounce of my dignity, every shred of self-respect, and showing them that I was no longer the timid, humiliated sister they thought I was. The office was unusually quiet that morning, the hum of computers and the low murmur of colleagues creating a backdrop to my storm. My sister and David were already there, locked in their usual private exchange of glances and whispered words. As I walked past them, I could feel their attention shift. My sister's smirk faltered almost imperceptibly, a flicker of unease passing over her face. David's eyes met mine, a flash of hesitation and something deeper flickering within them, something unspoken but electric. I stopped a few feet away, letting the silence stretch long enough for it to be uncomfortable. My voice, calm but firm, cut through the quiet. "We need to talk." Her eyes narrowed. "Oh, about what?" she asked, voice tight, composed, but lacking the smugness I had grown used to seeing. I looked directly at David, feeling the heat rise in my chest as our eyes locked. There was a flicker of guilt there, yes, but also admiration, something that hadn't existed before. I drew in a breath and spoke evenly. "About the truth. About everything you've hidden from me. About the games you think you can play with people's hearts." For a heartbeat, the room felt suspended. My sister's posture stiffened, the practiced ease she usually carried faltering. David shifted uncomfortably, a subtle sign of his own inner conflict. I continued, letting my voice carry not anger but clarity and strength. "I know about your relationship. I know about the whispers, the secrets, the stolen moments. And I know that for a long time I felt powerless, humiliated, and invisible, but that ends today." Her eyes widened slightly, realizing that I wasn't going to crumble. She opened her mouth to retort, but I held up a hand. "No, I'm done letting you define me. I've proven myself in front of everyone. I've reclaimed my work, my confidence, and my life. And now I want honesty. No games, no lies. And if you can't handle that, then step aside." David's gaze softened, and for the first time, he spoke. Not to defend his actions, not to justify himself, but to acknowledge me. "You've grown," he said quietly, almost reverently. I see you differently now, not as someone caught in between, but as someone who stands on her own." My chest tightened, a mixture of relief, tension, and longing coiling together. My sister's smirk vanished completely. The confident, untouchable aura she had always worn was replaced by unease. For the first time, I realized she had underestimated me, and the realization was intoxicating. I held my head high, letting her see that I was no longer the shadow she had mocked. She had taught me cruelty, but I had learned strength. As I stepped back, I felt the electric pull between David and me, charged, forbidden, and tantalizing. I didn't need to act yet. The acknowledgement, the shared tension was enough. I had reclaimed my power, and the romantic tension that had been simmering quietly for weeks now pulsed openly, though carefully, in our interactions. He wasn't hers, at least not in the way that mattered anymore. And I wasn't a failure, not now, not ever. Walking out of the room, I felt a sense of liberation that I had never known. The confrontation hadn't needed anger or tears. It had only required truth, confidence, and the quiet realization that I was stronger than anyone had ever given me credit for. And as I glanced back, catching David's lingering gaze, I knew this wasn't the end of our story. It was merely the turning point. The storm had passed, but the sparks it left behind promised a future filled with both challenge and undeniable desire. The days that followed the confrontation felt different, lighter, yet charged with the weight of all that had changed. I no longer felt the sting of humiliation, nor the invisible chains of my sister's mockery. Instead, there was clarity, strength, and an unexpected kind of hope. I had faced the lies, the betrayal, and the awkward tension, and in doing so I had discovered something far more powerful: my own worth. I spent mornings at the office focusing on the projects that truly mattered, afternoons with friends who had always supported me quietly, and evenings with a renewed sense of self. Every small victory, every compliment, every nod of acknowledgement from colleagues reminded me that I was no longer defined by what others thought or said about me. And then there was David. The tension between us had not vanished, it had transformed. Gone was the secrecy, replaced by something subtle, careful, and meaningful. Our glances no longer carried confusion or guilt, but a quiet understanding and a simmering attraction that neither of us could deny. He approached me one evening, just as the office was emptying, and for the first time we spoke freely, without the weight of my sister hovering over us. "You've changed," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. "Not just in confidence, but in the way you carry yourself. It's mesmerizing." I felt my cheeks flush, a smile tugging at my lips. "I've learned a few things," I replied, heart racing, "about standing up, about refusing to be defined by others, about myself." He nodded slowly, a mixture of admiration and desire in his gaze. "I see that, and I want to know you, really know you." It was a moment suspended in time, electric, tense, but brimming with possibility. For the first time in months, I felt my heart light, freed from the storm of humiliation and betrayal that had shadowed my every step. And yet there was caution, a mutual respect for boundaries, a slow and careful acknowledgement of feelings that had been forbidden before. Looking back, I realized that everything, the humiliation, the betrayal, the heartbreak, had led me here. They had tested my resilience, sharpened my confidence, and revealed the depth of my own heart. I had survived, I had risen, and I had discovered that love, even when complicated, could be honest, tender, and electric. Walking home that evening, city lights reflecting on the wet pavement, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known before. The past had not defeated me. My sister's cruelty had not defined me, and the forbidden tension I had felt for David was no longer a source of guilt. It was a spark of hope, a promise that life could still surprise, even after heartbreak. I smiled softly to myself. I was no longer the family failure. I was the woman who had reclaimed her life, and the story wasn't over. It had just begun.